Welcome back to part two of my interview with Graeme Harper here, director extraordinaire, which he is. And first part, we spoke about sort of the early days and the classic Doctor Who that Graeme was involved with. But now, of course, he had a unique position of being, I believe, the only Doctor Who director to date that's actually bridged both classic and new Who. So this is going to be very interesting. His stories were all David Tennant, mainly. Yeah, I think it was all David Tennant. He didn't work with
Yes.
any others, I don't think. And Graham's done an awful lot of David Tennant stories, many of which have been regarded as, some of the best, actually. And also he worked on the spin-off series, the Sarah Jane Adventures, with the much missed Liz Sladen, dear Liz. So we'll be talking about that too. So, okay, Graham, thank you so much for still sticking with me. I appreciate
My
it.
pleasure.
That's lovely. So, how did this come about, Graham? How did you get involved in coming back after all those years to work on the relaunch of the series?
Well, so when I heard that Doctor Who was coming back, I had had a previous friendship with, well, I say friendship, but certainly working relationship with Russell T Davies several times before he was asked to bring it back. We met when I first started directing. I was asked within the first couple of years, I was asked if I'd like to make a program called On the Waterfront, which was a children's 2-hour program on a Saturday morning, but it was all comedy. It was a series of comedy sketches of one sort or another. And Russell was a junior assistant producer, think they were called in those days, where he contributed and wrote a thing called The Flashing Blade, which is an old French thriller series set in the 16th century, I think. And he redubbed all the voices. He rewrote the scripts and redubbed. You know how when any foreign films and television series were shown, they were dubbed. So you saw the mouths doing something. They were saying the words in French or Chinese or whatever, but the English voices didn't really try to capture the in sync with the mouth, so it all looked out of sync anyway. So with that in mind,
Reminds me of you remember that series Monkey? The
Monkey.
Japanese series Monkey.
Oh
It was called.
no, well, tell us.
Uh, that was done like that. It was a Japanese series. It was really popular amongst the kids. I used to love it. It used to be on BBC Two in the early '80s or something, and it was all dubbed into English. And of course, when they were speaking, what they were speaking was probably about 30 seconds behind the dub. It never synced up, but it was a wonderful series. So that kind of what you're saying kind of reminds me of that. Yeah.
It was part of the comedy because you could see they were saying something else, but he had all these silly camp voices going, "Oh, don't you touch me with your sword like that!" And it really camp and silly, and very very funny. And that was Russell T Davies's. I wouldn't say it was his beginnings, but certainly his early days of writing for television. Very funny. And so we were all in an office together talking and discussing the different elements of comedy we were going to be brought into the show and that I was going to direct, which was a lot of fun. I really had such a lot of fun with these. And I remembered Russell very warmly. It was a lovely guy. I met him several years later doing a comedy series where he came as a script doctor to help to buffer up and make even funnier something that was funny already. So I had a little bit of knowledge of Russell. Anyway, when now we mix to sort of 20 years later, and when I hear about it, I write to him. I sent him a letter saying, I'd give both my arms to actually come and do one episode. I would really like one more go at Doctor Who, especially if you're going to make it single camera, because that's how I felt it should have been made in the 80s. Not that I had a say about that, but that's what it desperately needed to compete with Star Wars and the likes. And he wrote back saying, "Look, it's not going to be up to me, Graeme, but if it were up to me, you'd be at the top of the list, I promise you," which was very nice of him. But I kind of knew I probably wasn't going to get back in at all, because I was, I was Yesterday's director, not for that. Um, but of course, I was desperate. I'd love to have done it anyway. Um, that was that. I then got, in 2005, when it started, I got a series set on in the northeast of England about the fire brigade. London's burning had stopped, but a couple of years later, the man who had it stopped decided we ought to have it again. I suppose must have had loads of letters saying, "Why did you take London's burning?" So anyway, this series was created, and it was meant to be set in the red, the sort of Newcastle, that area, Middlesbrough, I beg your pardon. It was meant to be that Redcar Middlesbrough area, which is petrochemical land. So you can imagine a fire service fighting against all that kind of danger was going to be pretty exciting. And I managed to be involved with that. So it's a 12-part series. I did 6, and another director did the other 6. And he was the senior director, and I was the other person. Anyway, this series was full of, every episode had 4 major incidents, not just 2 big ones and 2 little ones. They were all major. They all needed lots of special effects, CGI work. So I had a fantastic grounding in that kind of work, CGI work, which little did I know was going to be of great benefit to me later. But I certainly wasn't going to be able to do any Doctor Who in 2005, even if I was offered it, and I wasn't. In 2006, well, 2005, while I was doing this series, Russell and Phil Collinson made contact with my agent and said, "Could we meet Graeme for lunch? We'd like to meet, with the possibility of, no promises, but maybe to take him on for one of the blocks of Doctor Who, second series." Yes, so I went to have dinner with them. We had a long conversation about what was going to possibly be the story and whatever. And it was a very pleasant, but I wasn't sure that they were going to choose me. And at the end of the lunch, it was lunch, not dinner, but at the end of the lunch, Russell and Phil looked at each other. They obviously had a signal. And Russell said, "So look, okay, we're going to offer you a block." And I went, "Oh, yippee." And I said, "So I've convinced you?" And they said, "Yes." So we don't know when it'll be. I can't give you any dates or anything at this moment, but it will be for 2006. Second series. And I said, "Oh, that's fun. I'm really pleased." And he said, and they let me know then that, oh, the name's gone out of my brain and I shouldn't do, but the Doctor Who was going to change. They didn't tell me who it was going to be. And, but they get back to my agent. So at the end of that lunch, I said to them, "We're now having a nice glass of port or something after the meal." Everything was relaxed. And I said, "So what was it that finally made you decide here that you're going to offer me a block? I know it's rude of me to ask, but I'd love to know, what did I say?" And they said, "Okay, nice to meet you properly about it all again for Doctor Who, and nice to see you again. But you made a serial with Peter Davison, The Caves of Androzani, and he said the Doctor series was dying. They were killing it off, not giving it any money and whatever. And yet, with all those restrictions, you managed to direct and make 3 ends, exciting ends of 3 episodes, in a time when it was really dying, and you lifted the whole thing. And because of that, we were very keen to meet you." because you had what do you call it? The end of each episode. I've forgotten what the term is, but
The cliffhanger.
a cliffhanger, the
Yeah.
famous thing. Why do I?
Which is really a real old trope, isn't it? It goes back to like the old,
Yes, so
the old 1930s Buster Crab stuff and all that.
yes, it's
Yeah,
silly to forget it.
yeah.
Anyway, if you can manage to do that with Tuppence Halfpenny, you might bring something really special to this. So I said, cool, thank you very much. That was very flattering and very nice of them to say. But anyway, um, so off I went. And that's what happened. And I managed to come back. And you're right, I have seen to be the only person that's been invited back from the classic series, which is great for me and sad for other people because it's a great series to work on. And because it was single camera, now, the single cameradness of it all is it was single camera, but every now and then, and quite often, we could bring a second camera in, which was of great help to get through the material in the time we had, because it was still quite restrictive in the amount of time to get all those wonderful dreams on the screen, because it's very adventurous, in terms of the amount of effects that it requires to achieve the excitement that's required. Um, and then off we went. And so I had this fantastic story. Now, they offered me one block in the lunch, but when I was offered the job, when my agent came to me and they said, "Oh, they've come through and you've got 2 blocks." And I went, "How do you mean 2 blocks?" He said, "Well, it's 2 episodes which are going to be in the middle of the series, but another 2 episodes which are going to finish the series. And the reason they're going to do them all is one big block, 52-day shoot." Because the Daleks are in it as well as the Cybermen and the Daleks all together. Cybermen on their own in the first block, and that's the first I knew. Cybermen? Oh wow, okay. And then there'll be the last 2 episodes will be the Cybermen at war with the Daleks. Wow, I got this fantastic. The two greatest arch enemies of all time. Well, they were at that time. We've also had quite a few since, but at that time, that was a fantastic coup for me because I'd worked with the Daleks obviously before, and we tried to show that they flew. That was that was what I was told by John Nathan Turner. For God's sake, let's show the Daleks can fly. So I did my best in the classic series, but in the new series, we now had greater opportunities, and it was really exciting just for that alone. Before we start, then Peter Davison. I'm sorry, Peter, not this time. David Tennant, I had now discovered was the new Doctor. What was wonderful about that was that I'd just seen him in Casanova. Oh, I just knew he
That was
was.
the first time I'd ever seen him as an actor. Funny enough, was
Oh,
Casanova.
he was
Yeah,
wonderful. That was a
yeah,
wonderful series. And I don't think he was Doctor Who in that series, but you could tell the kind of caliber that was now going to come to Doctor Who was very exciting. And it was when we started and I met him and we started working. Gosh, he was fun to work with. It was a lot of fun. That's how I got onto Doctor Who the second time.
yeah. That first story, with bringing back the Cybermen, because that was the first time they were brought back for years, and they were redesigned. They look quite different from what they were previously. They've been updated. The only thing I sort of say about them, the new
Here
Cybermen,
we
the
go.
Cybers they were called, weren't they? Cybers Industries or whatever it was, yeah,
Yeah.
where they were being built, was if you ever wanted to be a subtle villain and creep up behind someone without them knowing, they wouldn't have been any good because the amount of noise,
They clung.
they made when they were marching, ain't going to work, is it? So that I
I'm
always thought
sorry,
that
I
was a design
disagree.
flaw, Yeah. Yeah.
They should have had under their feet.
They couldn't. You would hear them a bloody a mile down the road, before they got to you.
What they should have had, we should have shown them having those pads you put under legs of tables and chairs to stop them from making a noise when you move, so that you see them clumping around, but they were silent. I'll remember that if I ever get back. I doubt if I'll ever get back, so that's fine.
Yeah, they needed like mufflers or something. I don't know what the hell you could have.
Yeah.
I always thought that was the only thing that let them down, because they would get they were giving you a bloody warning about half a mile down the road before they got to you.
No, but that was part of the villainy. That's what you heard. You actually, we made a a virtue of that you actually heard
Yeah,
in the distance, and then the door open, and there'd be one all smashed open.
yeah. I mean, I loved the bits when they were smashing through the glass. You remember when they got into
Yes,
near the cliffhanger and they're kicking the glass in like they
yeah,
like we don't give a damn, you know what I mean?
yes.
That was good. Their entrance was good, I must admit. You know, they're all
Dave,
marching down. You know.
I absolutely loved sitting down with a storyboard artist for all the CGI and effects work. Um, we sat down with, I think all the directors did, sat down with a storyboard artist and actually created the scenes as seen shot by shot in a drawing. And I remember the drawing of that, which was a low angle. I said, well, a really low angle. And this glass smashes through, and there's this towering monster standing there and steps right in. It was, and then we did it. And you compare the two, we did exactly it was just wonderful. The storyboard artist creating what I had in my mind was just brilliant. Brilliant to see it drawn by somebody. That was stunning. It was very exciting.
I loved the character. I thought he was great. He was kind of like a Davros character almost in a
What
sense. Lumic.
Lumen, yes.
It was like he was like the Davros to the Cybermen as the other
Yes.
was to the Daleks. It was an interesting idea, but I believe that became that idea was through necessity because apparently Roger Lloyd Pack injured his foot or something.
Yes, he
So
broke his
they
leg or
had to
something.
write that in.
Yeah.
He wasn't originally going to be like that in a wheelchair at all, I don't think.
No, it was a great
Yeah.
moment though, wasn't it? The
Yeah,
fact that it wasn't
it worked.
straight.
It worked, and it worked really well.
Yeah. He
Uh,
was wonderful as
he
well.
was
He was,
great in that. He really was. Because I think most of us, most of the audience, really only had the image of him in Only Fools and Horses. I'd never really seen him do much acting outside of that. I must
yeah.
admit.
I
You
think he
know,
worked a lot.
but he
I
was
think
bloody good. Yeah, he was really
he
good.
was excellent. Yeah, it was
Doing a
great.
straight role, he was very impressive. You
Yeah.
know,
He was great fun.
and he got some great one-liners. I think he was really chewing that a wee bit. He was relishing some of those lines he had. I think he was loving that. Yeah.
But he had, I asked him to play, I said to him, just think of, play it like George Orwell, bring a bit of George Orwell to it. I mean, goodness knows what George Orwell, I don't remember what he spoke like, but I actually do, because I remember he had a strange way of, he almost declared like poetry, a poet declaring, like Dylan Thomas. If you hear Dylan Thomas quoting any of his poetry, it's said in quite a strange, stilted way, and sort of high up, high high octave, very, very odd way of speaking. And Roger Lloyd Pack, he found this strange, it was all odd, austere, strange way of speaking, which was fascinating and fantastic. Yeah, it was really good.
The other thing I liked because the story was set on on a parallel world, wasn't it?
Yes.
Alternative kind of,
Yeah.
yeah. And I loved the juxtaposition of when they were outside, and you've got the airships going along in the sky.
Yes.
It was kind of what people would call steampunk. I think that's the right description.
You steampunk
Sort of
and
steampunk feel,
very
yeah.
much like Germany,
Zeppelin balloons or whatever they were, yeah.
Germany in the 30s. It was that was the I wanted to be austere
Yeah.
and gothic, strange,
I like that. I like that juxtaposition was really, with the modern and
and the
the
old.
airships was really,
Yeah,
really cool. Yeah, I
yeah.
love that.
And
Yeah.
also his airship, his Zeppelin that he roamed about the world in. It was just we had a shot taken of traveling. I said I would love a shot over London. I want to see the Zeppelin. I want the camera to be moving with the Zeppelin, and the Zeppelin's going across London and Tower Bridge and the river and whatever. So we had a shot made by Phil Collins, and he went off and shot this wonderful traveling across the whole of London, in which we then had CGI'd this fantastic Zeppelin, which was Lumic Zeppelin going across it. I thought when I first saw that fantastic shot, oh, that was brilliant. The combination of the two was so clever. Funny what amuses us.
Visually really striking, because it was just going across so slowly and just quietly, you know, along, you know.
And then landing and seeing it land at an airfield,
yeah,
coming
yeah,
gracefully down. Oh,
brilliant, yeah,
fantastic.
brilliant. It was very well realized by the, you know, the effects team, the
Yeah, that is brilliant.
CGI or whatever they did with it, you know.
But you know what's lovely?
Or maybe it was a model shot that was.
No, it was CGI that was made by a graphic artist and matted into a film shot of
It
traveling.
looked very seamless, even for that time.
Oh,
It was pretty
brilliant.
pretty impressive. Yeah,
And we did a storyboard for that. Of course, the CGI guys are going to. I just love having it drawn and then seeing it actually done but filmically. Oh, it was brilliant. Really exciting. You can't imagine for a director. So, I mean, it's nothing probably to anybody else, but to me, that was a piece of magic. When I say it's nothing, I don't mean it's nothing, because there's a lot of hard, loving work to do that. But compared to, you know, Spitfires chasing after Heinkels or whatever, that was stunning. Wonderful.
absolutely. Some great visuals in all of it, really. You know, but those certain things you think you remember. You know, the balloons were something I remembered. You know.
Yes, good.
Then you went on, as you say, you did that block. You know, where you did 2 stories back to back, 4 episodes.
Yeah.
52 days. That's a wow. Um, but another first here was that on television, at least, these 2 heavies had never met. You never had the Daleks and the Cybermen on screen together fighting, you know. So this was a first, and you get to direct it.
Yes.
How
Exciting.
did that feel?
I was nervous but thrilled. I mean, it was exciting. It's funny in Doctor Who terms, it's really exciting, but it was really exciting to do. I don't know. I mean, I never found Daleks particularly frightening, but I did in this lot. In this series, I did. I found them they're really, really frightening, or could be frightening, and tough. And the Cybermen were tough. And when they met each other in a corridor, and started having a little spat, a camp spat to each other, it was funny. And also at the same time, I mean, funny. It is funny, but it's also quite terrifying, because you know that nobody has a chance with either of them.
I would say, well, I think the Daleks kind of got the upper hand a bit more, didn't they, with them?
Oh yes.
You know, I think they just thought they were, you know, pathetic. They thought the Cybermen were pathetic, you know, really. And
Yes.
it's just a nuisance to them more than anything, you know. But the thing I really would like to talk about this particular story was Billy Piper and David Tennant. Billy playing Rose, you know, the companion, and they've grown over, you know, they've grown very fond of one another, traveling together and everything. Then you have that kind of very, very dark, deep scene near the end where they're separated, and it just seems like they're only separated by a wall. You know, there's a shot where you can see them just like, you know, looking at one another, or seemingly looking at one another, yet they're in a different dimension altogether from one another. They can't get back. They can't see one another. The thing's been walled up. You've got some heartbreaking scenes there. How did that play out for you, Graeme, directing that? Was it emotional doing those scenes, and the one on the beach as well, you know, the goodbye thing?
It was. So I knew very early on how good Billie Piper was, because of the scenes, particularly in that first Cyberman story. The scenes with her and David and Noel Clarke were so truthful and honest the way they played them. I got to know very quickly the depth of character that Billie Piper could reach inside her Rose to bring out, etc. By the way she played with the Doctor, etc. It was there were marvelous scenes to do. They really came alive when they're in scenes together. It was wonderful. There's a lovely scene with her and Noel and the Doctor when he first comes in and finds them trapped in a room with the Daleks. And he comes in and says, "Oh, Daleks, oh, there," and just kind of plays with them. But with a underneath, you could see there was a fear in the Doctor of them. He knows they're dangerous. He plays with them, and he's very cocky with them. But there's always an edge of something can go wrong here. So he taunts them, but he's also careful. And she and the way she uses his bravery in the same way when she first starts to talk to them and looks right in the eye. Oh, it's fantastic, wonderful performance. So I knew what I had. So when it came to the episode called Doomsday, where she's leaving the series in that sad way when she's in one dimension, he's in another, and they hug the walls, knowing that they're the other side, but in another dimension. It's so honestly played. It is little. It's underplayed. It's beautiful. I knew that the scene we were going to have to do at the end was going to be great. It was going to be a beautiful scene between the two of them. But what I hadn't banked on was the weather and the playing of it on a beach. Now, the weather was great. It was sunny and whatever, but very, very windy. So now we're going to be faced with a continuity problem of hair. And what we decided was to say, to hell with that. Let's just play it in the wind and the way it is. There's nothing we can do about it. My problem was how many goes could I have to play the scene favouring Billie, because it's going to require some decent close-ups and get right into her face and her tears and whatever is going to happen. And neither of us knew how much tears she was going to have, or how many times she could do it creating tears, because she didn't have teardrops put in. She was going to create it, and but she said to me, so what happened on the day, 7 o'clock in the morning on this beach, Southern Down, I went to the makeup caravan to talk to both of them, to talk technically about, right, who do I favour first? Technically, in the world of film and television, when you're going to come to do close-ups, you always, if it's a man and a woman, you always, for politeness sake, you always do the lady first. You always shoot their close-ups first. That's a tradition. But in this instance, because of the weather, the wind, I said to them, which way do you want me to go? Shall I do David's close-ups first to allow you to preserve your tears and the emotions so you don't have to let them go? Or shall I do you first, Billie and David? What do you think? And they both agreed that she should go first, sod the weather, because this was a good reason why, to hope the wind would drop, that I'd do David first. But it was agreed that we would do her first. But she said to me, Graeme, I'll only have probably 2 goes at it before I'll start needing tears, because every time I go through the lines, I feel emotional anyway. And the other problem was, this was 3 or 4 months before she was generally going to leave the series. In other words, we were doing episodes, whatever it was, 4 and 5, or 5 and 6 in the middle of the series, and 12 and 13, which were at the end, were going to be butted up. So it meant there are still 3 or 4 series blocks to be done before she was going to leave in the story terms. So it was quite an interesting moment because was she going to be that emotional and it would all go, or did she have to go through the other block? We were bringing that scene quite early on. Anyway, got to the moment where we were going to do her close up. So I did all the wide stuff first, um, where she didn't have to be emotional. You didn't have to. They didn't have to go through it. It was just two fairly static people talking to each other in wide shot on a beach, and wide shots of people in the background watching her mum and dad and lover. And got to the close up. The wind was terrible. But anyway, we shot the thing. She absolutely burst into tears on the first one, and it was difficult to for her to play the scene, I suppose, clearly because she was sobbing so much. But it was fantastic. It was it was a very wonderful emotional scene from her point of view, and we were going to get David next, and that was going to be good. You knew that. Um, but for several reasons, we had to go again. Um, the wind was terrible. Her face was covered in hair or whatever, and tears. And we decided we had to go again. So we went for a second take. Wind was still the same, etc. It was even better. It was so, but she managed to control the sobbing, so the tears were running, but she was able to do the dialogue. It was just a magical, very truly sad, magical moment. I don't know how you can say that, but it was for a director, it was a fabulous thing. And the other thing which I did, which was a bit cruel, was I held on to the end and held on to the end and held on to the end before I said cut. I'm sure she really hated me for that. Um, but it was just because the reaction, I could go back to him and go back to her, and the reaction she was giving was just, you could choose any moment. It was just marvelous to see her true love as a character for this person, the doctor. It was wonderful. And then we turned around. I got it. I had two goes, and I got. You didn't have to do it 3 or 4 times more. I then covered David, who was just magnificent too, and so tender. And then he has the famous line, and Rose, but Rose, and he never gets to say love you or whatever. And then he's gone as well. I could just imagine how I was going to put that together. It was just really stunning. It's one of the most marvelous moments I've ever had in my whole career. It was absolutely brilliant. In fact, it will go down probably as the most that and the moment with Catherine Tate, because Catherine Tate is also the most wonderful actor. So you've got two
Mm.
fantastic assistants, and I had the chance to work with them. I also had the chance to work with Freema, who was also magnificent. I can't take any away from her at all. I mean, there were three fantastic assistants.
Yeah. Brings me on neatly to Freeman now because you directed an episode called 42 with Freeman. Uh, uh, um, and that was written by Chris Chibnall, of course, who went on to be the showrunner later on, you know.
He never asked me to come
Yeah, and
back.
he did Broadchurch too and things
Yeah.
like that, you know. He was very well known for. Uh, um, and what was it? What was kind of interesting about this particular episode was that it did play on the actual length of the episode. They had 42 minutes to solve this problem,
Yeah.
so it was supposed to be in actual real time. You know that they were against the clock, literally. So how was that kind of, you know, sort of doing something like that kind of style of story, Graham?
Um, yeah, that was, you know, you take on board all these different aspects of each episode. Um, I didn't feel any pain at all. It just needed pace. That needed real pace and energy. Um, I suppose to help you get over the fact that it probably wasn't really 42, but it was just going hanging on to Rose and her tears and her tearful ending of her life with the doctor. Well, we thought it was almost the ending, but um, the emotion that she created in that scene, and also the one where she's hanging on to the lever, they're two great emotions, different emotions that Billie Piper was asked to produce, and I thought she did them so magnificently. Freema was always wonderful in all her roles, in all her not roles, scenes. And then there's the scene where she's in with, I can't remember the name of the character now, but she's in the little spaceship going away from being drawn towards the sun, and showing her emotion for someone she cares about, this young man she's with in this canister. I thought that, and also when she's leaving, you can see her, the doctor watching her going away, and she's watching the ship going away more distantly. Her emotion in that is so underplayed and beautiful. The proof of a fantastic actress who's going to go a long way, and she has. She's doing really well. So, and quite rightly, because she's a great actress. As Catherine Tate shows us, that she's also such a deep thinking and can dig right down inside her soul to produce a marvelous performance. Aren't I lucky to work with so many lovely actors? Because it goes on. There's more to come. You've got Liz Sladen, another one.
Exactly. Yes, you've got Liz, the classic from the from the older series.
Yeah.
In the modern, yeah. So you got that going on there.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely get on to Liz, because you work with Liz quite a bit, really.
I have, although I didn't before. I worked with her a couple of times in Doctor Who's and the old series. But
more in the modern era, you've worked with quite a number of times.
Yeah.
But this one though, this one I want to hear some. I'd love to hear some stories from you about this one. This was only a small scene that you did, but it was an episode called Time Crash.
Oh yes.
Which brought back a classic Doctor that you worked with before, you directed, as well as the modern Doctor that you were directing quite a lot at that point too. So you got both of them. You got Peter Davison and David Tennant together, and now, of course, Peter Davison is
his
very
father.
Complicated. Is David's father-in-law.
They've got lots to talk about.
Yeah, that's a timey-wimey thing in itself, Yeah.
It must be odd in their household when
I can't imagine.
lunch. Do they
Christmas, what do you
do
get for a present? You get your,
Do they have non-stop talking about Doctor Who? They can't ever
What do
forget.
they put on each other's DVDs and watch them? Yeah. And compare notes.
Doing that scene was a real pleasure for me, because I really liked David Tennant. I liked working with him. I liked his Doctor. I liked the surprise he would give you, the way he was going to deliver a particular speech, etc. And then I was now working with Peter Davison again. They liked each other. They really genuine. And David Tennant said, "But you were my Doctor." Genuinely, he said that. He said it in the story, which I loved that line. "But Doctor, you were my Doctor." That was funny coming from another Doctor Who. I found that funny. That's the fourth wall line again, isn't it? Because it's David Tennant.
It was genuine because he grew up with that Doctor, watching that Doctor. Yeah,
I thought,
so
clever line. What a clever line Russell wrote for that.
Yeah. Oh, that was written by Stephen Moffat, I believe. That scene.
What am I talking about?
Stephen Moffat wrote that. Yeah, I mean Russell was still running the ship.
No,
but,
it was Stephen
Moffat wrote that scene. I think it was for Children in Need again.
It's lovely.
I absolutely love that scene. It's brilliant.
But that line, "But Doctor, you are my Doctor," is a magic. It's well done.
Yeah, there were some sweet little moments in there, but there were some really quite comedic things as well. I mean, he was goading Davison for half of it. I mean, he's talking to himself when you think about it, because they're the same person, aren't they, the Doctor? But he's taking the piss out of Davison.
Yes.
Not many people can carry off a decorative vegetable, the celery and all that. He's like, and he's looking, oh, that's what the back of my head looks like, and all this. He was really giving him a hard time,
Yes.
No, at the end of it, there was a lovely tender moment where they both reconciled, you know.
But they're both great actors.
Yeah,
They brought such fun
yeah.
out of the characters. Lovely. That was fun to do. Of
That was
course,
awesome. I really love that. I really do love that one. I think it's great seeing them together. They bounce off each other so brilliantly, you know.
yes, I agree.
Yeah. Um, so then now, of course, you were talking about Catherine Tate earlier on, and I'd say, and this just is me just being biased, you know, I guess. But from the modern era, um, during Tennant's run, I mean, uh, um, I th- I think um, that Catherine and David were, from my point of view, the perfect pairing. Um, I liked their dynamic a lot. They kind of done away with the love story kind of angle
Yeah,
and got back to what it used to be like in the old days, where they were just two friends traveling the universe, you
yeah,
know. And I like that they did that. You know, they've explored that other thing. They've done that. That's cool. But it was nice to sort of get back to the kind of traditional
yeah.
friendship dynamic. I thought, I thought Catherine was brilliant. You know,
I totally agree with that.
yeah,
Um, and it just shows you can do both. You can do the romantic side of Doctor Who, and you can do the true friendship. And I think that works really, really well. She also has an emotional relationship with him as well, but it's as friends. You're absolutely right. As true friends. And I learnt so much of the non-comedic version of what Catherine Tate does. She was so good. I'm thinking at the moment, she did a whole range of things in the Doctor's I did, but she Doctor Who's I did, but she was particularly interesting to me in two. One was 42. Sorry, I beg your pardon. One's Turn Left, and the other is the Agatha Christie story.
oh, the unicorn and the wasp.
Wasp,
Yeah,
yeah, which
yeah, yeah.
I thought had both her comedic side, because she was wonderful in that, very funny as he was. She brought huge comedy out of Doctor Who. In that scene, oh no, in the kitchen is brilliant. It's a marvelous piece of comedy um, from David Tennant as well. It's brilliant. And then in Turn Left, the pathos, the depth of character she brought out of her character in that story was just magnificent.
Yeah, that one in particular really did show her strengths, you know, as an actor. I think the
Yeah,
turn left, because she
I
had
like.
to carry that episode more or less because it was Doctor Light as they call it, wasn't it?
Yeah, he
Tennant
was on
wasn't
holiday
really in
somewhere.
it, so she was
Yeah,
kind of she was the you know the main driving force of it
yeah,
really. Yeah,
Catalyst. Yeah,
yeah, and Billy was in that too. You know,
yes, yeah. She
kind of
comes back.
guiding her and getting her
Yeah,
to do this particular thing she had to do to set everything's back as where it should be again. You know.
yeah.
Uh, um, uh,
Yeah, good stories. They played well together. Brilliant.
yeah, very much. The Ood one, you know, you remember the Planet of the Ood that you did?
Yes.
They were an interesting alien race, weren't they? With the spaghetti, looked like spaghetti hanging out of the,
Yes.
you know,
They
yeah.
were in that story. Very sad. That's a very sad story. Again, her looking through the bars at these pathetic prisoned uh, Oods, and her emotion for what's going on in the world today. Really, I mean, it was just a marvelous piece of drama of acting. Wonderful.
That was definitely a take on slavery, wasn't it?
Yes,
Modern slavery. It must have been, you
yes,
know,
that's what I mean.
they were persecuted as a race, and
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
yeah. So there is a lot of sadness. There's pathos there and everything, you know,
But
that
it
they
was,
went through.
but it's played so genuinely. That's what I liked about all of them. They, when you do Doctor Who, you must never send it. You can't send it up. You mustn't. you have to play every scene real, as if it really it can happen, does happen. It's not otherworldly. You have to play it for real, as if it's actually here and now and genuine. Don't send it up, or don't put it in inverted commas. Really play it for the truth the script can be, etc. However phantasmagorical, can't speak. However phantasmagorical it is, play it for real, and it really will pay off. And it does. I think that's what's so brilliant about these actors. They really found the ways to play the scenes they had to play in strange situations beautifully, very humanely.
Very much, Graham. Yeah. Um, the the Agatha Christie one was interesting. There was a lot of humor in that one. You know,
Yes.
the way they were all like sitting around, and they're doing these sort of flashbacks. Well, it was, I think it was yesterday, and it goes transitions into, and there's all these kind of impossible things that happened, like their alibis and all that stuff. It was really, and there was a lovely cast in there. You got
Yes.
Felicity Kendall in there, and people, and Fenella Walder, and people like that. They were all great. Yeah,
But we did try to make it like a real Agatha Christie or
yeah,
Poirot story,
yeah, yeah.
sitting around in the dining room or the living room.
And they're all doing their little confessions or whatever, the
And
red
the doc
herrings and all that
and
kind of
then
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
and they interview them, interrogate everybody, in the way that you get in the Agatha Christie stories, like I'm trying to think of all the stories, but they always end up in a living room or a dining room or a drawing room, um, where the main protagonist decides who's going to be the guilty one, etc. It's fun, yeah, great, a lot of fun.
Where was that? That was a beautiful house where they shot. Where was that, Graham?
I
Can
can't,
you
it
remember?
begins with T. I can't remember the name. I'm sure it's Tregonway House. Is it anyway near Newport in Wales? Was this stately home,
It was
um,
lovely,
where we shot that? Yes,
beautiful. It really was beautiful.
it's
Yeah,
immaculate with beautiful,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
great halls and
Of-
fantastic big kitchen that we generally shot the scene in. Yeah,
yeah.
fun.
Um,
Yeah, it's all shot in. It was all shot in Wales. Yeah.
and also, who had a little role in it was actually David Tennant's dad was in it. He was the butler, I believe.
Yes, he was the butler.
Yeah, so that was kind of nice. I mean,
It's funny how that came back, because
yeah.
I can't remember. It was David Tennant saying to me one day, My father's coming down to see me, and I wonder if there's a scene he could be in. He'd love to be an extra in it. Could we find something for him to do?" And straight away, I think Phil and I said, "No, it wasn't Phil." But we both decided the part for him to play is the butler. Because the butler would have something more to do, so we could feature him a bit more rather than just passing through in the background of a scene. He could actually become part of somebody offering something to someone, that we could feature. So that's what happened. Yeah, no, it was good.
Yeah, nice little neat touch there. Yeah. Um, then you did a massive again, another big two-parter, um, which was the end of that season, I believe. Um,
Uh,
uh,
Journey's
the
End.
with the Daleks again, the Stolen Earth and Journey's
Yes,
End,
Journey's End. Yeah.
and that was until recently, to the specials, was the goodbye story for Catherine. She
Yes.
got a very heartbreaking end to her run there, didn't she?
Yeah.
Because her memories were all going to be erased of her time with the Doctor. So it was
Yes.
that was a very sad moment. But
It was sad for both of them. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It was both of them in the story. Yeah, it was good, and Wilf plays a major part in that too.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
He became something very special in it, didn't he? And
Tell me
it's
about that now, because it seems a good time. That's a neat moment there to bring up Bernard Cribbins, because we only lost him last year, sadly, and he
yes,
did pop up for a little tiny scene in one of the specials. That's the last thing he ever filmed.
Yeah,
You know, Doctor Who was the
yeah.
last thing he filmed. Tell us about working with Bernard, Graham, please.
I can't imagine what it was like on the set when Bernard Cribbins passed away. That must have been so emotional for everybody on the set because, especially if that was his last appearance, that was yeah, quite touching. Um, he was absolutely lovely to work with. He was given so much respect by everyone. Thrilled to have him on the set and in the show. Um, he's got history. I mean, he was just in so many movies, so much a part of our lives, in and especially in television. And didn't he do Jack and Nori? He told stories, children's stories on Jack and Nori, I think, and it was very, very popular. Um, I loved working with him. I enjoyed talking to him about things that I'd seen him in, like Tom Thumb, etc., um, and war movies. He's done so much work, and he never ever upstaged anybody. Everybody was a part of the scene as far as he was concerned, and I guess he felt everybody else makes him look good too because he's good and they're good. It was always going to be good. He was just a pleasure. It was such a pleasure to have welcome. I can't speak. Welcoming him onto the set and working with him was an absolute delight. And he brought such special things to playing the scenes. I found him delightful. His ideas were fun. You couldn't refuse them. They were so clever and nice additions to the way he was going to play some of the scenes. Wonderful. It was a real pleasure.
The scene, yeah, he's extraordinary. He it's interesting. The accolades are when he passed. You know, the generations that watched him either watched him, you know, pre Doctor Who or watched him in modern Doctor Who, depending which point you saw him. It just seemed that he was universally adored. Really, never really heard any bad words about the man at all. Everyone loved that character that he played on Doctor Who. You know,
Yes,
The character of Wilf. You know, yeah.
there's a there's a lovely scene in Turn Left where he's saying goodbye to the Italian family who are being taken away to a camp and could be slaughtered, and he plays the ex-military man saluting them, and for me, he summed up my father not talking to me about events that happened in the Second World War that he'd seen. He never talked about it. And Wilf doesn't talk about anything, but what he does, how he salutes and has a comment, which is like saying, it's happening all over again. And he has tears in his eyes. And I believe they're genuine. I believe they were Bernard um, showing the emotion of what he never talked about either, because he must have been a part of the Second World War at some stage. He must have been. Was he old enough to have been in the Second War? He must have been. He must have
Well,
seen.
he was in his 90s when he passed, so I think he would have been. Yeah,
He would have seen
yeah,
stuff that he didn't
yeah.
want to talk about either. Well, he showed it in that scene. It's a
Mm.
very, very. That's what I mean by these were great actors who brought in little scenes, in little moments, big, big emotions. It was wonderful and showed them quietly. Yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant actor.
So rest well, Bernard. You were great. You really
Yes,
were
you were.
fantastic actor, and very much part of my childhood as well. You know, I remember him. You know, on Jack and Ori, and I remember him voicing the Wombles. All those sort of things were
But
part of me as a kid. You know.
if you watch Tom Thumb, he's marvelous in it. This little English comedy character. Um, in those days, because but he was wonderful. He's been in everything. He was so memorable, brilliant.
Yeah, he was. He was. Um, Now we get on to the last one, the last story that you did with David Tennant, and this was quite again. This was quite this was I would call a more intense episode. Was the Waters of Mars story. It got very dark at the end, incredibly dark.
Mm.
The end. There was consequences there.
Yeah,
What was interesting about the whole thing was that Tennant's doctor had got to a point in his life where he thought he was untouchable. He was kind of godlike. I think they used the term Time Lord Victorious.
yeah.
He called he, I think he self-titled himself that. But he was like, nothing. I have to fix everything. I'm the one. There's no one else but me. And there's something going on here. That he's kind of losing the plot a wee bit. But unfortunately, because of his arrogance, there are dark consequences at the end. So this story, Graeme, what are your memories of working on that and that narrative that played out? Because it's a very good episode, I think.
To me, it was the end was shocking, and made even more shocking by the way he played it. he there's a scene where he in the base, Bowie base, where he at the end when he's saving them, and it's all falling apart and whatever, he's back and he's saving them, and he absolutely screams. Yeah, I am exactly what you just said. You're not going to beat me, pal. I am God. I'm everything. And he goes completely manic. And I've never seen David like that ever play the Doctor like that. Um, it's a truly extraordinary moment and performance. Um, and also the fact that he says, as the character, you can't change certain points in time, not just certain points. Certain the big points. There are big moments in history you cannot change, and yet he did, and he regrets that because that brings him right down to earth, if you excuse the pun. Um, I just loved the way he played all that, and how he thought, and also how he goes away and thinks about how he's going to show these different emotions. Is quite extraordinary. Now, he never discussed with me, I never said to him ever, how are you going to play this scene? Um, but of course, we rehearsed it, so I would discover how he wanted to play it, and I was entitled to and could say, I think you should bring that under, or you should be even more over the top, or whatever. But I never had to say anything really. I mean, I did discuss certain aspects of scenes with him, but I never faulted anything he did. It always made sense. And I was always intrigued to see where he'd go from that in the next scene or whatever, which was a real pleasure for me. My job then was to know how big or small the shot should be, how wide or how tight or whatever. And it was very easy to know and be inspired by how I was going to put that emotion on the screen. I think all directors felt the same. I'm sure they did, and got the same pleasure that I did out of working with David, which was a joy and a real pleasure, and interesting, always interesting, always interesting to discover um, how the scene was going to play out, and also interesting how I could suggest anything. It was a lovely atmosphere to work with or work in.
How were the scenes achieved? How was the effects achieved with the water? Because you got they're constantly dripping with water. The guys that got possessed by the water thing.
They had all sorts of tubes underneath and hidden in amongst their hair, because they all had real hair. It was not wigs or anything to hide anything. Um, it was quite straight. Gosh, that was great. And also the prosthetics that were hiding certain things. So that's them. I don't remember anything running from the top of their heads, but it was all within the prosthetics of the. Are you talking about the on their faces? Yeah, it was hidden in the prosthetics of that strange, cracked, gnarled face that they created. Um, it was yeah, it was,
And it was gushing out their hands constantly as well. You know,
yeah.
that
Well,
sort of
that
thing
was
going on.
tubing
Yeah,
again down
yeah.
either side of their hands, etc., along the arms and done hidden by the sleeves of their clothes. Um, Gosh, that must have been uncomfortable for them and cold too, because it might have been lukewarm water, but eventually that goes cold on your body as it goes cold. So it must have been very uncomfortable, um, but quite creepy. Gosh, it was creepy to look at.
Was that a difficult thing because of health and safety? You know, when you've got water in the studio with electrics and everything, I mean, that must be. It has to be very, very carefully
Yeah, you
worked
can't.
out, isn't it?
You
Yeah.
do. There weren't many scenes of them moving around very much, except for the two men running. When they're running down the long, long corridor, that was quite tricky to do, doing the close-up stuff of that. But because I think they were running water then, and you see them on the roof with water gushing out everywhere. Quite, yes, the electrical side of it had to be considered very carefully. So we had lots of tanks that we were using in which were then dealt with and in editing with, so you lost the edges of things, so it all looked complete lengths of rooftops. I'm thinking at the moment. Um, yeah, there was tricky aspects to that show, but nothing. I mean, it took us time, but there was time. We managed to do everything within the time given, etc. It's all about planning. Um, Obviously, both from me and how I'm going to. I always plan very carefully how I'm going to shoot something, even though it may change on the day and something else offers a better way of shooting it. But I always plan very carefully what the shots are going to be. And when we saw the scene rehearsed, I was able always to say, right, we're going to cover it this way, and then if I'd forgotten something or overlooked an aspect that had to be covered in a different way, um, I was offered ideas by the camera crew or the CGI guys or whatever, another way of doing it that might be more useful. But I always had it planned very carefully so that we didn't waste time going, oh, I wonder how we should cover it. We knew how we were going to cover it. And then when I saw the scene rehearsed, something would happen that would maybe go, don't need that, we'll do it that way, and we'll just change one aspect and make sure it's covered in a different way. You can't not do that on Doctor Who, otherwise you will run out of time before you've shot any scene. You had to be very careful, but that enabled other people to know exactly what you were doing, therefore they knew their role in that and how they were going to. I'm talking about the technical crew, how they were going to um, be able to work, and then the operators on cameras would also know what they needed to achieve what we wanted to do. It was Doctor Who was an absolute joy to make because everybody on the set wanted to be there. Isn't that wonderful? I mean,
That
I
is.
can imagine any production
That's what
where
you want.
you,
That's what you.
oh
That's the thing you want most as a director, isn't it? When everyone is passionate and on board with you.
yeah,
Otherwise, things can fall apart quite
yeah,
quickly if they're not. Because every part is makes a whole, doesn't it?
yeah.
Everyone is vital, and
You know,
if one thing is askew, it can affect everything else.
yeah.
You know,
It's once you're part of the family of Doctor Who, you never leave it. Well, I suppose they could kick you out if they don't like you, but you never leave. You're part of the family, whatever happens, and it is a joy that allowing people to enjoy themselves making the program is my huge desire and everything I do. I don't say we achieve it every time, but most of the time, particularly towards the latter part of my career, um, I seem to have found the way, I think, of enabling people to enjoy themselves and want to be there, and not because of me, thank God. I hope not, because it's such a lot of fun to do, and if you've got everybody on side with you, because they want to be there, that's fantastic. What a lovely thing, and I can't imagine why it should be ever thus or not thus. But Doctor Who is such a lot of fun to make. I'm sure all the big series like Star Trek, Star Wars, I bet they're all the same. Everybody wants to be there to and see what's going to happen today, and just be surprised and enjoy the fact that they've actually been a part of that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. Yeah, it's the team thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Teamwork, and then you get a good result at the end of it.
Yeah.
Uh, um, Now going off from Doctor Who, you're still on board, but you're part of the Doctor Who universe now, as it were. Because this was a spin-off series that was made with Liz Sladen reprising her character of Sarah Jane Smith. For a modern audience. Pitched at children's TV. It was. It wasn't on a later slot like Doctor Who. It was more like tea time. Um, and you directed 3 episodes of this, Graham. Um, how did it feel doing, something that was more geared at children? Uh, what was the difference in the dynamic between, doing the Doctor Who and doing these episodes with Sarah, with Liz?
Nothing. No difference at all. Probably less CGI work than we would do, maybe a little less effects work, um, due to cost, I suspect, um, but not for the enormity of the emotion of the scenes and the shows. It's almost like the sister of Doctor Who, isn't it? Really, it was. I I would have approached it and did approach it exactly the same way as Doctor Who. I never gave it any less or thought, oh, it's only for kids. It's a really important series, and needed to be directed and made and shot properly, exactly the same way as Doctor Who, if required. When I say that, the effects, if you have any, had to be as good as and as big as they are on Doctor Who. Um, that really depended on the amount of effects that were required, and they probably were cut down because I'm sure that show cost a lot less than Doctor Who. But it was still expensive, and it's still required to be given the same love as Doctor Who. So I personally don't think I ever reduced any of the n- requirements of a director to make that show. I made it the same way as I'd have done any scene in Doctor Who.
What was interesting about those episodes that you did, the stories that were going on in it, were something that we never saw on Doctor Who with Sarah. That it explored her family background. You know, you got to see her as a teenager and a
Yeah,
what if scenario that was going on about
yeah,
her and her friend,
yeah. Closed doors. I mean,
one of them falling from a pier. And the death. It was to do with time travel,
yeah,
and uh,
closed
um,
doors.
yeah, it affected. Sarah was in sort of disappeared, and it was thought that she was dead, that she fell from this pier, but it ended up being the other girl that did.
Yeah,
And they had to set things right with that. But that was quite emotional. Again, all these Sarah Jane things I've noticed. Each one has an emotional part where Liz is very upset or something. Conveying emotion, and they tap into that a lot.
I found
Um,
what was interesting for me is when she was the assistant to the Doctor, in the old series, the classic series. Um, she was a particular kind of person, very exacting, pedantic. She was a proper investigator, an investigative journalist. Um, when she did this series of Sarah Jane of where it was all about her. Um, she was different. She was much more. She had much more depth of character, which is what you're talking about, and having to examine herself and her own reactions to whatever events. And also, she had a son that she had to care for and protect and whatever. So you had a motherly instinct and showing coming out, which gave Liz lots more to play with. And I think she showed what a great actress she was. Um, that's not to say she wasn't great, but she was good in the classic series. Here, she was fabulous. She was much more, and you got to know much more about her character, and she played it beautifully. And it was the emotion that she brought, that she made the audience follow and carried, was wonderful. I thought she showed what a lovely actress and how good she was, deservedly, of that series.
She went down as, as one of the most popular companions too. Many times people have cited Liz as, one of the best. Um,
Yes, I
Rightly
think.
so. I think she's got all the classic hallmarks of a great Doctor Who companion. Really,
Yeah,
you know.
I
Um, uh, there was a story that you did called "Enemy of the Bane," and one of the and it brought back, and I believe it was the last appearance on TV of Nicholas Courtney as the Brigadier. So, and you got to the film to be the director for that one,
yes.
which is must be quite nice for you, that you were doing that one. Um, and it was, yeah, it was literally, I think, the last time that Nick played the played the brig on TV. Never got to do it on Doctor Who, modern Doctor Who, sadly.
No, it's a shame
Uh,
that
you know, yeah.
I had a lovely. There was a moment with him for me which was lovely. When I was working with him with John Pertwee in the classic series, where I was the AFM with Michael Bryant, and we were out in a China clay pit, and the whole of we were away for about 8 days, I think, filming. It was quite a long filming sequence. I think it might have been less than that, good week. And the hotel we're in had a disco, so we used to dance in the evening. Most of us danced till about 11 o'clock at night, which we shouldn't have. I mean, we'd gone to bed, but it was a great lot of fun making this show. And John Pertwee decided to call me Groover. So I was known from there onwards for the whole of the show as, oh, hello, Groover. Groover, could you get me a cup of coffee? Oh, Groover, this, that. And so I was called Groover because I was rocking and rolling with makeup and wardrobe and anybody else that wanted. We all danced to good rock and roll, pop music. So I was known as Groover. So every time I met John Pertwee, ever in corridors or whatever, whether I was on Doctor Who or not, he said, oh, hello, Groover. And Nick Courtney picked that up and called me Groover as well. So when I eventually, had never met, um, uh, 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 I'm going to say the Brit. I had never met Nick really since my time on Doctor Who in the 80s, 70s and 80s. Our paths didn't really cross ever again until he came back on Sarah Jane. And the first thing he said as he came on the set is, hello, Groover. I'm now, I don't know how old I was, but I was,
You
what was it?
thought, oh no, I'm being haunted by that again after all these bloody
I
years.
couldn't, people said, why is he, on Sarah Jane, they all said, why does he call you Groover? Groover, you're 65-year-old git. And I said, well, it goes back quite a long time. You'll have to ask him. And that was it. I didn't ever explain it. I just relished in the fact that this old git was called Groover. But that was nice for me. I wasn't sure about being called Groover in the 70s, but I quite liked it as an old git. it was quite nice for him to say it. One will get to another. Thank you very much, Nick.
Yeah. So it must have been nice working with him. And when you look
Yes,
back on it, you think, God, wow, that was the last time.
yes,
And I got to share that experience with him.
I did, and I also liked it the way he and Liz played together, because they obviously had some great memories because they worked together a lot in the old days. So it was nice for her to have lovely Nick Courtney come on set and be a part of and bring back all those memories for her. I know she loved it. I know she was really, really happy he was there.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was so nice to see them reunited one last time. That was really, 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 really sweet. Um, well, now, wow, we've gone through an awful lot, Graham. You and I feel like we've gone through a journey, you know, uh, with all these memories, But bringing it up to date now, just to round this interview off, it's been absolutely brilliant. Um, what are you doing now, Graham? What projects are up there for you, or on the boil, or what
Yes,
what are you doing at the moment?
I'm not actively doing anything at this moment in film or television. Well, not I've never been actively doing anything in film on television work. What I'm doing at the moment is I've in the 80s I did Howard's Way. The producer I was working with then on Howard's Way gave me a book one day and said, "I'd love you to read this and let me know what you think about it." I read the book and I said, "Are you thinking of making a television series of this?" And he said, "Yes, and I'd like you to direct it." And it was a big action story, a true story. And it's a brilliant story. And I said, I'd love to do this. Gosh, I'm so flattered that you've asked me. He said, no, I think you'll do a good job with it. Um, he could never get it off the ground with the BBC. And he worked for the BBC, so he couldn't offer it anywhere else. So it died. And I've been thinking about it on and off for 30 years or so. And 2 years ago, I read the book again and I decided to take an option on it and see if I could get someone to write the story. Because it's been haunting me, not every day of my life, but it'd been haunting me for all those years. So I bought the option. I asked a friend of mine who's a writer, would he read the book and then consider writing this as a 6-part story? And he loved it. So he started, and we've now got a showrunner on board to see whether he can make head or tail of this. Because we need 3 writers really on the whole show. So we're just about to create the first episode. In other words, we've got it written. We're just polishing it off, and a treatment of the whole thing so we can sell it and see if we can get someone to buy it. And maybe that's what I'm going to direct next. But I'll certainly want to produce it. Or executive produce it. So that's what I'm dealing with. It's a really good wartime adventure story, but it's true. It's a fantastic story which also has a huge love element to it. That's what I'm doing.
Great. It's just nice that you're still, got
I'm,
ideas, and you're still doing things. That's really
I
lovely to
haven't
hear.
given up yet, but
Um,
maybe it's given me up. I don't know. We're gonna find. We'll see.
I don't. I hope not. I think, yeah, yeah. You keep going, Graham. It's great, the work that you've done.
Oh, thank you
Um,
very much.
I want to thank you, Graham, very much for the generous time you've given me for these interviews. It's been absolutely fantastic to be in your company. Thank
Oh,
you.
that's very kind of you. Thank you very much, and yours too.
It's been absolutely wonderful. And I hope you guys got a lot out of this, because maybe there's some things you didn't know about before. There's certainly stories I've heard from Graham today I hadn't heard before. So hopefully I hope I've sort of got a few things out of him that maybe you didn't hear, prior to that, but prior to this interview. Graham, thank you so much. And thank you guys for watching this. I really appreciate it. We'll be back with another interview very soon, and I hope you'll join us then. Until then, take care, and we'll see you all soon. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye bye.